This is the Black Star Review of Rashid Johnson's exhibition at the Guggenheim, a poem for deep thinkers. Welcome back, Black Stars. I'm Anastasia X, and I love art almost as much as I love Black people, so I started this platform, Black Star Reviews, to shine a light on Black creativity in New York City and beyond. And today we're going to the Upper East Side. But before we get into the show, let's take a moment for the ancestors. Ashe. The review I'm about to read you is available on my website. You could go read it yourself if you wanted to, but I am happy that you're here. While you're on my website, you'll see that I have so many other essays and reviews and writings that you can read, and I hope you'll check them out. If reading is not your thing, that's okay too. I am on social media on Instagram and TikTok. My handle is @blackstar.reviews, and that's a great place to find me if you're interested in short videos, hot takes, unfiltered thoughts, behind the scenes stuff, interviews. All of that and more is on my social media pages. And without further ado, this is the Black Star Review of Rashid Johnson's A Poem for Deep Thinkers at the Guggenheim. On the first day of my required freshman social studies class, History 107, Survey of African American History, the professor wrote the N-word on the board. Next, he conjugated it, row by row, replacing the ER for usage in the present tense with I, you, he, she, and we. Yo, nigo. Tú, nigas. Él, ella, usted, niga. Nosotros, nigamos. I don't remember his point, but I thought college was off to a really riveting start. He would go on to award me a C+ for the semester, which is the lowest grade I'd ever gotten in high school or college or in anything. I've never gotten another grade that low. But then he turned around and wrote me a glowing recommendation for graduate school. In a postscript twist, 2 years after I graduated, he was one of 4 people charged with drug distribution to prison inmates and was incarcerated for 6 months. I thought of him, the time he served, and his conjugation exercise when I later came across the term negrescence. The essent ending indicates a developing state or action. Iridescence combines irid, which means rainbow from the Greek root iris, with the essent ending and means beginning to be a rainbow. Negrescence then, in a literal sense, means beginning to be black. I'd first seen the term while trying to process Paul Beatty's 2015 bombshell of a book, The Sellout. I own 1 copy of the text, and by my count, the artist Rashid Johnson has stacked at least 20 copies across various sculptures, and it would seem that the story, or at least the title, made an indelible impression on him. The Guggenheim, which is the most visually striking building on Museum Mile, has filled its rotunda with a survey of Rashid Johnson's artwork to date. Since Johnson is only in his 40s, I imagine this survey is one of 2, 3, or even 4 more that I'll get to see in my lifetime. With more than 90 pieces of artwork, it combines his work across eras and across mediums, which for him seem to be intertwined. His self-portrait era, where he posed himself as historical Black leaders like Frederick Douglass and Thurgood Marshall, coincided with his photography era. His large-scale sculptural works, which resemble a sort of jungly IKEA aesthetic, incorporate his shea butter carvings. I'd been looking forward to the show since December 2024, when they teased it in The New Yorker under the headline, The Confident Anxiety of Rashid Johnson. This is not an amateur diagnosis on the part of the magazine. Anxiety is another recurring theme in Johnson's work. Until the Guggenheim, I'd only ever seen 2 of Johnson's works, and each piece was isolated. First, I saw his sculpture, Untitled Stranger, in Flesh of the Earth, which was curated by Enuma Okoro at Hauser and Wirth. Second, I saw his painting, if you count Black Soap on Tile as painting, titled Untitled Anxious Man in Edges of Alia at the Whitney. In both cases, the work was contextualized. Johnson's sculpture, which was live plants, soccer balls of shea butter, and provocatively titled books atop a powder-coated steel structure, made sense in a collection of artwork that highlights our interdependence with Earth. Johnson's painting, a bewildered blockhead scribbled in soap drippings on tile, illustrated the tension that choreographer Alvin Ailey felt as a high-achieving queer black man in America with bipolar disorder. As a result, I came into the show eager to learn about Johnson's work within its own context, to know more about an artist who's so often cited and exalted, and whose work I've really enjoyed. It's possible that the survey, which is entitled A Poem for Deep Thinkers, is just too deep for me. But if I can be honest, which is what I always strive to be with you all, I think the show wasn't designed for me or for us. I think the show aims to keep things shallow, to sanitize the implications of the imagery, and to use a lot of words to say very little. And I think that all of this is an effort to ensure that the intended viewer gets to stay comfy. I've narrowed it down to just 4 examples, but as usual, I encourage you to visit the show and decide for yourself. Now, you can't see the show anymore, it's closed, but when I wrote this at the time, you could still see it. Example 1, self-portrait laying on Jack Johnson's grave, 2006. Rashid Johnson lays as if deceased on top of a stately tomb marked with the name Johnson. The section, Death is a Good Start, mentions Jack Johnson as a legend with no further explanation. Why might R. Johnson choose to lay on the grave of J. Johnson? What makes J. Johnson a legend? There is no biographical information about Jack Johnson, the American boxer who became the first black heavyweight champion of the world in 1908, when his physical defeat of Tommy Burns signaled a symbolic defeat of Jim Crow. There was no mention of Jack's public cavorting with white women, which could have been an interesting tie-in to how Johnson depicts himself awake in a blue bed next to a sleeping white woman in his film On the Top Floor. Example 2, self-portrait with my hair parted like Frederick Douglass, 2003. Excerpts from the description read, functioning as both a self-portrait and an homage, this early photograph positions Johnson as a contemporary iteration of Frederick Douglass, one of the most photographed figures of the 1800s. Through playful mimicry and call and response, traditions rooted in gospel services, the artist attempts to replicate Douglass's pose and parted hairstyle, a look so uncommon today that it verges on the humorous. Tell me, is this a homage, or is it humorous satire? Who was Frederick Douglass, and why was he one of the most photographed figures of the 1800s? Historian and writer Sarah Lewis argues that Douglass had his photo taken at every turn because he understood the power of images as a way to humanize Black people in the eyes of the nation and the world, which was a key part of his abolition work. It's interesting to me that Johnson's image is framed as an attempt at silly dress-up and in the same sentence draws on the significance of Black gospel traditions. Meanwhile, the context of the original image is one of a man seeking freedom for his people. I see no appropriate entry point to a punchline here. Although there is another entry point to interracial relationships, because Frederick Douglass's wife was white. Example 3. Signed Angela Davis Civil Rights All-Stars Throwback Dashiki Jersey, 2003. Excerpts from the section entitled Irreverence read, the quotes he utilizes are evidence of his active intellect and, like many of the hip-hop generation, his ability to remix and repurpose those objects and gestures into altogether new forms. For instance, signed Angela Davis Civil Rights All-Stars Throwback Dashiki Jersey pays tribute to the venerable educator and organizer, but recasts her as a sports star, likening politics to game theory. This feels like a missed opportunity to use words meaningfully or instructively. There are a number of phrases in that sentence that conceal hip-hop generation, venerable educator and organizer, game theory. Here's how I would explain it in plain language. Johnson, who is 48, grew up immersed in hip-hop, basketball, and his parents' activism. Here, he honors Angela Davis, one of the only remaining highly visible leaders of the Black Panther Party, with a throwback jersey. Among basketball fans, wearing the jersey of a retired player is a way to recognize the player's continued influence on the game. In this way, Johnson elevates Davis's status to that of basketball legends like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. The title of the show comes from an Amiri Baraka poem. I think it's safe to say that Johnson is doing something more specific than likening politics to game theory. Example 4, Untitled Anxious Men, Series of 3, 2015. Excerpts from the label read, in Untitled Anxious Men, Johnson delves into visual expressions of anxiety, particularly in relation to Black masculinity, parenthood, and the systemic failures that leave Black children abandoned and unsupported. This exploration is especially poignant as it occurred in the mid-2010s, a period when high-profile cases of police brutality gained widespread attention. These pieces reflect the artist's personal struggle to soothe those internal and external anxieties during major life transitions, while also questioning how art can act as a cathartic tool. Drawing from spaces of cleansing, prayer, and relief, Johnson offers both individual and collective release. What a relief! Through simply observing Johnson's work in a museum, that I might be released from the weight of the Black plight. How nice to read briefly of high-profile cases of police brutality without having to picture faces or remember my reactions to Michael Brown's murder in Ferguson, Tamir Rice's murder in Columbus, or Laquan McDonald's murder in Chicago, which all happened in 2014. Systemic is the only word here that hints that there may be a reason for Black men's anxiety, but the vagueness of the word failure unfairly implies that the fault could be on anyone. In each of these examples, the narrating voice of the exhibit has used impressive words and intelligent phrases to talk around race. Terms like Black, Black identity, Black culture are included throughout, but the only mention of white refers to a grid of bathroom tiles. And here I analyze this imperfectly. I had 32 photos of labels or walls of text that I took at the exhibition, and when I searched the word white, it only returned one result. When I searched the word Black, it returned 18 photos. We cannot have a serious conversation about Blackness without acknowledging whiteness. Describing shower walls is not going to cut it. Blackness is a distinct identity. I'm still Black, whether there are white people around or not. However, Angela Davis's activism with the Panthers does not make sense without whiteness. If whiteness was not an insidious creeping vine, Frederick Douglass would just be one man with a humorous side part, and perhaps history would not need to remember him at all. If whiteness was not dangerous, Tamir Rice might go out this evening and have a drink with his college roommate. I believe that Rashid Johnson knows this, but I'm not convinced that the Guggenheim's curatorial team shares this understanding. I don't mean to rob Mr. Johnson of his agency. Surely, if he thought the labels were problematic, he would have spoken up. But since whiteness suffocates and silences, I can't help but wonder if they heard him. The idea of negrescence, which is a theme in The Sellout, the book that Mr. Johnson incorporates into a number of his structures, comes from the work of Dr. William E. Cross Jr., who published a theory of Black identity development called Shades of Black in 1991. The structure of the theory of negrescence, which has since been applied to a number of other identities like gender, sexuality, and other races, is pre-encounter, encounter, immersion, emersion, and internalization. The encounter stage, which is the moment you realize you're Black, or at least that you realize that you're not white, kicks off the racial identity development journey. This show, despite its repeated references to Black identity, Black history, Black people, and Black liberatory ideals, is situated in the pre-encounter phase. It has not yet considered itself in relation to whiteness, immersed itself in the history, rejected performativeness, and internalized its identity. The show has not experienced negrescence, has not negressed, is not negressive, and I think that's why I can't understand it. The labels and descriptions are conjugated for a tense that doesn't exist, a reality where Blackness is an aesthetic and whiteness need not be named. We don't live in that tense, and neither does the full power of Johnson's work. This allows the intended audience to come and see without leaving and thinking. It prioritizes comfort and visage. It's unfortunate that without the right attention paid to context, the message for deep thinkers, casual viewers, and anyone at the Guggenheim is lost in translation. Rashid Johnson, A Poem for Deep Thinkers, opened at the Guggenheim Museum on April 18th, 2025, and will run through January 18th, 2026. Admission to the Guggenheim is $28 for adults, but admission is pay what you wish on Mondays and Saturdays from 4 o'clock until close at 5:30 p.m. Advance reservations are suggested. All right. This has been another Black Star review. I really appreciate you sticking around this far and hearing what I thought about a show that has since closed and that I really, I think despise is the word that I would use to describe how I felt about the curation, not the art, just the curation and the presentation of Mr. Johnson's works. If you're not already, I hope you will follow me on social media. My handle is @blackstar.reviews on TikTok and Instagram. And if you just absolutely love this essay and you're like, where can I find more things to read by you? Go to my website, blackstarreviews.com, where there's so much to read about art, fine art, galleries, museums, theater, all films. I recently did some film reviews. Great. Since you've stayed here all this time, I feel like maybe you should just leave a comment and say what you thought about this video, or maybe you saw the show, or maybe you're a big fan of Rashid Johnson, or maybe you are the curator at the Guggenheim who wrote these labels and you're like, this isn't fair. Sound off in the comments. Since we're here on YouTube, go ahead and click subscribe so that you'll be the first to know about future video reviews. And that said, thank you so much for being here. This has been another Black Star review. Black love and starlight. Stay shining, y'all.